Moving on in Chapter 5, the chapter on infancy and cognitive development, we're going to be looking at Part 3, which is individual differences in intelligence among infants. Now, we all know all of our babies are super smart and super cute, but how do we actually look at intelligence in infants? It can be very difficult, right? They don't talk. They can't tell us what they're thinking. They can't answer questions. So how do we really know about intelligence in infants? Well, understanding infant intelligence is based on infant development. And there is a scale out there that's widely used called the Bailey Scales of Infant Development, or the BSID, which is the BSID-2 right now. It's in its second iteration. And when it looks at, or what the Bailey calls mental scale items and motor scale items. And there's a little graphic here on the slide, on the right-hand side, kind of shows you what those are. So some mental scale items at 1 month could be the infant quiets when picked up. Motor scale item might be infant makes postural adjustment when putting it on the examiner's shoulder. All right. A little bit later on, if we look at like 5 months, mental scale item, infant is observed to transfer an object from one hand to another during play. Motor scale item, when seated at a feeding type table and presented with a sugar pill that is out of reach, the infant attempts to pick it up. Things like that. So the mental scale items, the ones here that are on the left-hand column, are used to assess verbal communication, perceptual skills, things like learning, things like memory, and problem solving. The motor scale items are used to look at gross motor development and fine motor skills. And then there's a behavior rating scale that's based on what the examiner observes during the test, and that's also used to kind of get a gauge on intelligence. And here we can see those Bailey items again. And these are also in your book on page 104. Now, let's look and see what the Bailey tells us. If we look at the Bailey scales and the scores that are obtained from the Bailey scales during the first year of life, and we look to later on, a year later, they're moderately correlated. So not a direct one-to-one. They're kind of, in the middle. But if we look at the Bailey scales and SES status, we're able to predict cognitive development among low birth weight babies from 18 months to 4 years. All right, so if we take the two and combine, and we take Bailey scales, low birth weight babies, and SES, low SES, and SES status, not low SES, but just SES status, we can be reasonably certain of what the cognitive development of low birth weight babies are going to look like starting at 18 months up to 4 years. Now, if we look at the Bailey and other intelligence skills, maybe given later on to children, they don't predict school grades at all, and they don't predict IQ scores very well. So what the Bailey seems to be showing us is lags in development. All right, anything that might be missing in terms of development, and also the strengths and weaknesses that an infant might display. Now, another way we can look at intelligence is what's called visual recognition memory. And this is an infant's ability to be able to tell the difference between an object that they've previously seen from an object that is new. And this procedure is based on habituation. Now, if you look at your book, it talks about visual recognition memory, starting on page 105. Now, Susan Rose and her colleagues did a longitudinal study looking at visual recognition memory. They showed 7-month-old infants, pictures of 2 identical faces. All right. After 20 seconds, one of the pictures was replaced with a different face. So now the infant was looking at 2 different faces. And then they wanted to see how much time the infant spent looking at each picture after the pictures were changed. So some infants spent, looked at the second set of some infants spent more time, looking at the new face rather than older face. And this suggested that they'd already seen the old face. They were more, and so they remember that old face. So this new novel stimulation of the new face was more engaging, and so they were going to concentrate on that. Now, later on, after 7 months, from ages 1 through 6, they were given an IQ test every year. And what they found was that children who had greater recognition or greater memory, showed greater memory of the faces that they were shown when they were 7 months, tended to have higher IQ scores. So this idea of visual recognition memory, being able to remember what you see, all right? We theorize that this is a stable trait, and so do we theorize that about intelligence. So it seems that this visual recognition memory and later IQ scores seem to be pretty predictive for cognitive abilities later on in childhood. That visual recognition memory being sort of key, or being sort of the first component when it comes to cognitive skill and later on IQ.